Janet, you're saying gravity might not exist as a fundamental thing in the universe?
I'm saying gravity might not exist as a fundamental thing in the universe.
Wow.
Man, Janet.
Let's keep that between us.
Yeah, don't
Everybody else, you didn't hear that? You didn't hear that because I don't want to turn on the internet? You know there's no such thing as gravity now. You know that, right? Jan 11 told me. There's no such thing as gravity.
It always cracks me up when people jump towards defending things, even though this woman just said, yeah, it's probably not a fundamental force, and his first reaction is, oh my god, now people are gonna And the funny thing is that Einstein has been, or was, right, the theory of Einstein has contained this general notion within relativity, that is, since the early 1900s, right? And this is something that I constantly talk about, is that for some strange reason, we have this profound contradiction where within microcosmology, if you will, like within the micro and macrocosmic versions of matter, we have the Newtonian version for the micro, and we have the Einsteinian version for the macro. The Newtonian version of gravitation is the one that most people are familiar with. It's the notion of gravity wherein you have like a force varying with the size of the masses and inversely with the square of the distance between them. That's the Newtonian version. It just goes on to state that everything is attracted to every other thing. And that's for the microcosm. Now for the macrocosm, they have Einstein's version of gravity, which is the space-time version, where people are familiar with the most classic representation is you'd have like a blanket that somebody stretches out, and then they lay like a ball to simulate the Earth, for instance, on top of the blanket, and you can see that the contours within the blanket, which is formed from the mass of the ball, right, they liken this to the notion of this ethereal space-time substance that Einstein cleverly employed to replace the ether. So, right, again, this is something that I've talked about often. We inherently have a contradiction within our models of cosmology where we teach people that gravity is both a fundamental force and not a force at all, depending on who you ask or what size or what scope of matter, rather, that you're speaking of. Not a good start. Not a good start. So I don't know why it took this woman saying that, John 11, to blow this dude's mind. That's not like a new piece of wisdom whatsoever. And the funny thing is that, you know, they'll try to tell you that Newton proved, or he established the universal law of gravitation in 1687, right? Isaac Newton's 1687 description of gravity. I like how they say description, and just that's it, like no discovery or no, just description, was considered scientific law until Einstein's general theory of relativity. One second. Until Einstein's general theory of relativity, published more than 2 centuries later, Newton had explained gravity as a force that instantaneously acts over a distance. The result is a pull between any two objects in the universe. Right, so again, they, aside from reconfirming what I just said, right, 1687 description of gravity considered scientific law. Scientific law, let's see if I can... What is the experimental evidence for Newton's theory of universal gravitation, which was considered scientific law, right? And still is. There was none. Physics professor, PhD. Because I could say the same thing, but I might as well pull up some reference, right? There was none. Right, none. Newton never calculated the force of gravity between any two bodies. He would have to wait for Cavendish. And if you're not... Fucking Cavendish. If you're not familiar with Henry Cavendish, what this guy did was he went and he quite literally hung 2 balls off of a torsion balance, right? So he had a torsion balance, and then he had a rod that was just suspended, just like freely hanging rod, hanging from a wire, right? Just kind of just freely hanging. And then he hung a weighted ball off of either end of this rod inside of like a shed. And then he stood outside of the shed and looked at it and just sat there and stared at it. And any movement of this rod was deduced to be the action of gravity. highly scientific, right? This is actually how they, it sounds like I'm making this up, and I wish I was, but this is how they established the gravitational constant, and how they so-called weighed the fucking Earth, despite the fact that it supposedly exists within a vacuum, where it would have no weight. But contradictions aside, this is how they say. Now, why is my thing taking photos? Contradictions aside, this is how they say that they weighed the Earth, is by the Cavendish experiment. So, where does that leave us? In a pretty bad state of things. You have the establishment of a universal law, so-called, by a man in the late 1600s, whom didn't even have the ability to study the atmosphere. He didn't have the ability to, they had just supposedly invented telescopes. So they thought up until like Hubble in the 1920s that the galaxy was no bigger than, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with any of this, right? But the mainstream train of thought was that the galaxy was no bigger than the Milky Way up until the 1920s. So about 100 years ago. So whatever he thought the galaxy was, whether they thought it was just the solar system or whatever have you, didn't have the ability to study the atmosphere. Telescopes had just been invented, had literally no idea what he's talking about. The theories of electrodynamics weren't established. They didn't have the theory of the laws of thermodynamics either. So it's like, where is he pulling? He didn't have any experimental evidence, and this is like you just saw. I mean, it still is considered scientific law. This claim that never had any evidence to begin with of this supposedly universal fucking force, which he would have been applying to a much smaller scale anyway. But it's like, no matter how you slice this cake, it's just horrendous, mixed with the fact that we now have two people, Newton and Einstein, that are saying, well, Newton says it's a fundamental force. Einstein says it's not a force at all. It's literally what he says. He says it's not a force at all. So, again, like, now let's take a look at what heliocentrists believe gravity to be doing. Let's look at this. This is what they think the solar system looks like as it travels throughout the galaxy. Just a mad spiral. Now keep in mind that circular motion is acceleration, right? So every single body in this supposed solar system, right, the solar system so-called, in this video, is undergoing acceleration, right? I think the official definition is something like circular motion is constant acceleration in a new vector every moment, or whatever have you. So, which is to say that it's about as close to absolute motion as you can possibly get, which means that you can use anything undergoing circular motion or accelerations as a reference. It gets a bit more complicated, but the general notion that you have to keep in mind here is that you feel accelerations. The notion that you would not feel the speed of the Earth would only apply if it were going in a straight line path, which it is clearly not, right? And it gets worse, right? Because there's supposed to be 4 different motions at least, and I'm not even including like Chandler wobble or any of those other, but like 4 primary motions. You have the Earth supposedly rotating about 1,000 miles per hour around the equatorial region. You have the Earth supposedly rotating around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. You have the sun, which is supposed to be rotating around the galaxy, and because it's just like circles within circles, and that's supposed to be around like 500,000 miles per hour. And then you have the galaxy that's supposed to be shooting through the universe at over 1 million miles per hour. So what you end up with is, especially considering that the heliocentric universe is supposed to be expanding, is the modern day theory, you have essentially this notion of infinite gravitational forces that would be acting on any given object. And all of these objects, right, like you have a person on Earth, for instance, that would be moving in multiple directions at once, all of them being rotations. And somehow, despite all of these forces and rotations, you end up with this. A completely and utterly motionless necklace suspended from my cupboard, right? Now I could pour a glass of water, but I mean, you get the point, right? If I were to pour a glass of water, what do you think the water would do? It would go completely motionless. You can have people build a house of cards. You can have people stack bowling balls, which I didn't even know was possible. You can have people stack bowling balls on top of each other. It's like, so somehow heliocentrists believe that despite this myriad of motions, all of them being absolute motions, accelerations, they believe that all motion is somehow canceled out. Like in the case of the Earth rotating, they think that some fucking how every single molecule is being displaced perfectly at millions of miles per hour, taking all of these speeds into account, in multiple directions at the same time, while displaying no motion whatsoever, just being completely and utterly undisturbed. They think that necklace that I just showed you is, right now, that free-floating necklace is wildly shooting through the universe at millions of miles per hour, rotating in different directions at once, but it's completely motionless. That's what they believe. I don't know what to say to that. It's insane. You know, the ecliptic, it's not just the sun, right? It's all of the planets. They'll say, oh, well, it's not completely perfect. Okay, it's a flat plane that all of the planets rotate through, or the stars, or the astroplanets, traveling stars. So, what they believe to be other planets, they think that they are all following a flat. This is why they say that, the solar system is flat. It's all on a flat plane. It's because of observations like the ecliptic, where they all follow the ecliptic. So, somehow they think that gravity is keeping all of the planets as they rotate wildly around the sun in a damn near perfectly flat plane with no deviance. And that it's pushing and pulling to maintain constant separation. That it's somehow negating all force that acts on any fucking object. Right? So there's no centrifugal force that's felt by any object, nothing like that. They think that it perfectly displaces every single fucking molecule and can allow for something like a plane to travel against the rotation of the Earth while being displaced in the other direction and feeling no sort of drag force or anything like that. So it can travel both backwards and forwards at the same time, despite the fact that it's not attached to the surface of the Earth. It's just being somehow magically dragged with no force through the atmosphere, or I guess with the atmosphere through space. It's mind-boggling, and it doesn't make sense, obviously. And then, of course, there's the fact that this theory, or this law, came from a guy in the 1600s who barely had access to telescopes, didn't understand the laws of electrodynamics, didn't understand the laws of thermodynamics, couldn't study the atmosphere. They didn't even have hot balloons or hot weather balloons, or whatever, right? Balloons that you can travel up in. They didn't have anything like that. He had no experimental evidence. And the man that finally did confirm this experimental evidence did it in the most laughable way possible, keeping in mind that they say that the force of electromagnetism is supposed to be like 10 to the 36th power times stronger, like an order of 10 to the 36th power times stronger than gravity, which is like an unfathomable number Like, just type that in and find out what it would be. It's like, I don't even know what number that is. It's insanely, like, so there's no way that you could ever, as a control for an experiment, separate gravity from electromagnetism. There's no way. And this is why people couldn't recreate the Cavendish experiment until recent times. And every single time that you see somebody that recreated the Cavendish experiment, they fail to do it. I've gone through like 2 or 3 different videos in the past where these people blatantly claim that they recreated it, and then sure enough, they completely fail to do it. They completely fail. One of the dudes literally halfway through the video gave up and was like, so I actually ended up going to my buddy. And then it's this whole thing. Like, it's bullshit. It's patent bullshit. Why are you teaching? Why are there like 36 different mainstream theories? It's like, what do you think it is? Is it a graviton? Is it the bending of space-time? Is it the mutual attraction of all masses of matter? The thing about the Newtonian definition is that it contradicts the second law of thermodynamics, technically the third law, because there's the zeroth, first and second, and then third. But the second law of thermodynamics describes, the first law of thermodynamics describes that energy can never be created spontaneously. It can only change forms. But then you have this like unobserved gravitational potential well, this ethereal metaphysical well of gravitational potential energy that can never, could never, and will never be observed. Obviously, it doesn't exist. Right? You're not gonna stumble upon a well of gravitational potential energy somewhere. Like, I found it! I fucking found it! Like, it doesn't exist. So they have this, like, it acts on all masses, no matter how big. It scales exponentially, and it's infinite, and it's continuous. So it breaks the first law of thermodynamics. Not only that, what was it? One sec. I can't remember exactly what I wanted to say. I mean, it breaks the first law of thermodynamics. It contradicts the notion of an expanding universe, because it's supposed to be like an all-attracting force, and yet you have an expanding universe. It's the most contradictory thing of all fucking time. On that note, the second law of thermodynamics, reason I got messed up is because the second law that describes entropy is blatantly contradicted by Darwinism, where the second law of entropy states that everything tends towards increasing chaos, and yet evolution claims that everything tends towards increasing order. It's like, so which one do you want to go with here? Like, these two things contradict each other. But, yeah, the theory of gravitation is completely metaphysical, nonsensical, untenable. Oh, dark matter. The reason that dark matter and dark energy exist is because of the fact that even mathematically, gravity does not work out. It doesn't work out in the modern day cosmology, in the mainstream macrocosmology. They had to insert, in order to add enough mass to the universe, they had to invent the fictional mathematical entities of dark matter and dark energy to account for the necessary gravitational mass. So right now, we're at the point where they say like 98% of all matter is consisted of dark matter or dark energy. Whichever one of these two. So, of this metaphysical substance that, again, just like gravity, can never be measured, will never be measured, could never be measured. It's not real, right? It's just completely mathematical and bullshit. Like, and this is the thing that people scoff at. Like, if you try to say, casually, if I was to insist, like, to one of my professors, like, oh, gravity doesn't exist. You know damn well, if they would shut the fuck up long enough to listen, that they would understand where I'm coming from. If they could shut up that long. But people will automatically scoff at this type of stuff without even understanding it. Having no idea. They have no idea what they're talking about whatsoever. It's like a contradiction in every fucking sense. It's not science, I'll tell you that much. Okay. That's all I got. Much love.